The entire history of the recorder, the gramophone. Before the gramophone, there was the phonograph, invented by Thomas Edison in 1877. Edison's machine used cylinders and could record and play back sound. Pretty amazing until we had to rewind it manually. Emil Berliner was born in Wolfenbüttel, a town near Hanover, Germany. His father, Samuel, was a salesman, while his mother, Sarah, cared for young Emil and his 10 siblings. When Berliner was still a teen, a friend of his father's who had recently immigrated to the United States extended an invitation to come to Washington, D.C., and work in his store. Berliner left for the U.S. in 1870 in order to avoid obligatory service in the Prussian military. Berliner was inspired to improve upon existing sound recording technology by Edison's cylinder phonograph. He thought disc, flat ones would be more efficient, easier to mass-produce, and more durable. He literally said, "Let's flatten this problem." Berliner started experimenting in his apartment. He spent a great deal of time at the Cooper Institute Library in Washington, studying the science related to sound and electricity. Determined to improve on existing technology, he set up a rudimentary laboratory in his apartment and began testing his ideas. Berliner's early experiments involved adapting methods originally used by Edouard Leon Scott de Martinville, tracing sound vibrations onto surfaces. Berliner experimented by recording sound as a lateral, side-to-side, groove on a flat disc, initially using materials like glass and zinc. He devised a hand- or weight-driven apparatus to rotate the disc while a stylus etched the sound vibrations onto its surface. To play back the sound, he attached a needle to a diaphragm, a modified telephone receiver, that would follow the groove and reproduce the recorded audio. He was inspired by the telephone. He worked on improving Bell's telephone system, and he figured, if sound could be transmitted electrically, it could also be inscribed physically. Like a drawing, but with vibrations. In 1876, Alexander Graham Bell presented his telephone at an exhibition at the Centennial Celebration in Philadelphia. Berliner recognized that he could improve the quality of the telephone's sound transmission. By experimenting with a telephone he had assembled in his apartment, Berliner invented a telephone transmitter in 1877, an innovation that would lead to the first microphone and clear, long-distance telephone communication. He patented the device on June 4, 1877. Being in need of cash, Berliner sold the rights to his invention to the Bell Telephone Company of Boston 3 months later for $75,000. Berliner left the telephone business in 1883 and set to work in his Washington laboratory. He studied the work of Charles Cros and Thomas Edison in order to learn as much as he could about sound recording. At that time, recordings were generally made on cylinders. Although this technology was already in use, Berliner began recording sound on disc. His first discs were wax-coated zinc pieces, upon which a sound diaphragm was coated. The discs were dipped in acid, which burned the pattern into the metal, and the wax was stripped. It required an up-and-down groove playback method. The needle moves from left to right in a vibrating rhythm. Berliner's first commercial gramophones, produced in the early 1890s, played 7-inch discs. The earliest discs were manufactured in Germany by Kammer and Reinhardt, a toy company. The first widely recognized model is the 1895 Berliner Gramophone, which played 7-inch hard rubber discs and became the iconic Victor trademark model. Berliner patented his entire playback apparatus as the gramophone. Berliner displayed his invention at the Franklin Institute of Philadelphia in 1888, but first marketed it in Germany. He engaged the services of a toy manufacturer, Kammer and Reinhardt of Waltershausen, to produce his gramophones. At this time, his apparatus was powered manually with a crank with a simple horn to amplify sound. No electricity needed. Early gramophone sound recreation plays grainy, wobbly. After returning to his U.S. lab, Berliner set out to improve the power base for playback and his disc replication technique. He employed several musicians to record on his discs. He began making discs from a new material composed of shellac, soot, and fur. Early Berliner discs offered turn-of-the-century American recordings, such as tracks by Buffalo Bill Cody, Cal Stewart, Len Spencer, Arthur Collins, Wes Osman, and Harry McDonough. The type of music that Berliner recorded later became known as Tin Pan Alley and ragtime. After the Ball, a tune associated with and immortalized through the 1927 musical show Boat, was recorded on a Berliner disc. Berliner's disc format was a hit. Within a few years, companies like the Victor Talking Machine Company. Despite the success of his corporation, Berliner only retained minority stockholder status. His gramophone patent became corporate property. Berliner's Gramophone Company was now controlled and split among three companies: the United States Gramophone Company in Washington, the Berliner Gramophone Company in Philadelphia, and the Seaman National Gramophone Company in New York. And in 1900, he signed a contract with American Gramophone and Columbia Phonograph to produce the Zonophone. Berliner's grandson, Oliver, in a 1992 issue of the Antique Phonograph News. He explained that his grandfather chose to set up in Montreal because of that city's strategic location and direct rail contact with Philadelphia. Berliner's Canadian Company was established on 2315 St. Catherine Street in Montreal. Its headquarters and retail outlet were housed at the same location and managed by Emmanuel Blaut. A factory was built on Aqueduct Street. The newly established Berliner Gramophone Company began advertising in magazines. He purchased and enlisted Francis Barad's image of his dog, Nipper, listening to his master's voice. The first record this image appeared on was number 402, or the track of Hello My Baby, by Frank Banta. Berliner's new company manufactured 2,000 records during its first year of business, and sold over 2 million records in 1901. By 1906, the company produced various models of its gramophone, including the Ideal, the Bijou, and the Grand. A few years later, the famous Victrola model was introduced. A large image of Nipper was mounted over the main entrance with the words, "The home of the Victrola." By this time, Berliner's son, Herbert, worked for his father's company and was instrumental in bringing the Victrola and Berliner records into radio. In 1924, the Berliner Gramophone Company was acquired by Victor Talking Machine, which became a part of RCA. The Berliner Gramophone Company became the Victor Talking Machine Company and later the RCA Victor Company. It was purchased by BMG in 1987. How a gramophone disc was made. Acoustic era. Sound was captured via a large horn that funneled vibrations to a diaphragm connected to a stylus. The stylus etched the sound vibrations as a groove into a rotating wax disc. Electrical era. Microphones converted sound into electrical signals, which were amplified and used to drive an electromechanical cutting head that etched the sound into a master disc. The original recording was made on a wax disc. The wax disc was electroplated with a thin layer of metal, usually silver or nickel, to make a negative metal copy called a master. The master was used to create stampers through more electroplating. The stamper was fitted into a hydraulic press. Heated shellac, a resin, or later vinyl was placed between two stampers. The press closed, imprinting the grooves into the disc while forming its shape. After cooling, the disc was trimmed and labeled. How a gramophone made. Turntable and motor. Early gramophones were spring-driven. Users wound a crank to store energy in a spring motor. Later versions used electric motors for consistent speed, usually 78 RPM. The disc sat on a platter, often made of metal or wood, with a felt or rubber mat to protect the disc. The tone arm held the sound box, which contained a needle, stylus. The needle traced the grooves, vibrating according to the variations in the groove. In early gramophones, no electricity was used. The sound box channeled the vibrations through a diaphragm, which transferred the sound through a horn, mechanically amplifying it. The gramophone, a groundbreaking invention in audio technology, operated entirely through mechanical means during its early years. It consisted of several key components, each contributing to the playback of recorded sound from a disc. Below is a formal overview of the construction and working process of a gramophone and its disc. Key components of the gramophone player. The turntable. The turntable was a rotating platform powered either by a hand crank mechanism or a spring motor. It spun the record at a constant speed, typically 78 revolutions per minute, RPM, ensuring smooth playback of the audio grooves. The tone arm and needle. Attached to the turntable assembly, the tone arm carried the needle, stylus, and guided it along the spiral grooves of the record. The needle, often made of steel or sapphire, read the undulations in the grooves that represented sound waves. The sound box, reproducer. The sound box housed the diaphragm and the needle. It played a crucial role in translating the mechanical movements of the needle, caused by groove variations, into vibrations that produced sound. The horn. Serving as a natural amplifier, the horn was a large, acoustically shaped tube that amplified sound vibrations from the diaphragm without using electricity. It allowed the recorded audio to be heard clearly and at a significant volume. The record, disc. Early gramophone records were made from shellac, a hard, brittle resin. These discs featured a spiral groove starting from the outer edge and moving inward. Each side of a record typically contained only a few minutes of audio. During the original recording process, sound waves, e.g., from a voice or instrument, entered a recording horn. These waves vibrated a diaphragm connected to a stylus. The vibrating stylus etched a spiral groove into a rotating wax or zinc disc coated with an acid-resistant layer. The groove's variations represented the pitch and volume of the recorded sound. After recording, the wax or zinc master disc was electroplated to create a negative mold. This metal mold served as the base to produce multiple copies through a process known as stamping. The final records were made using hydraulic presses, which imprinted grooves into heated shellac or vinyl. Stampers, placed on either side of the blank material. Once pressed, the records were cooled, trimmed, and labeled for distribution. To play a record, the needle was placed on the outer edge of the disc. As the disc spun, the needle followed the grooves. Vibrations were transmitted to the diaphragm, producing sound. The horn amplified this sound naturally for listeners to hear. The gramophone represents a pinnacle of early mechanical audio engineering, laying the foundation for modern sound recording and playback technology. It's an entirely physical method of sound reproduction, relying on intricate craftsmanship and material science, that remains a marvel of pre-electronic innovation. The modern electric turntable emerged, using electromagnetic cartridges and amplifiers for better sound. Electric gramophones, also known as record players with electric reproducers, emerged in the late 1920s and gained popularity in the 1930s. The invention of the electrical recording process, which involved a microphone and amplifier. The rise of vinyl and modern turntables, 1940s, 1960s, 1948, Columbia Records introduced the LP, long play, 33 1/3 RPM vinyl record. Longer playback time, up to 25 minutes per side. Made of vinyl, which was more durable and had better sound quality than shellac. 1949, RCA introduced the 45 RPM single, compact, ideal for individual songs. A mechanical gramophone can play one or two records with a single winding. After that, you need to rewind the spring to listen again. Hand crank gramophones became less popular. When the electric motor ones were produced at this point, electronic turntables powered by electric motors, plugged into a wall socket. No winding needed, consistent speed, and longer play sessions. Sound is read by a stylus and magnetic cartridge, converted into an electrical signal. The signal is amplified through speakers or headphones, offering higher fidelity and volume control. Emil Berliner didn't just invent the gramophone. He invented the soundtrack of the 20th century. If you enjoyed this gramophone history, please like and subscribe for more stories, hit the notification bell to not miss any of our videos, and you can also leave us your comment in the comments section below. Thank you for watching, and we'll get back to you with another interesting video.